Welcome to Book Data, the place to be for insightful book summaries and reviews. Today, we're diving into The Power of Self Esteem, a transformative book that offers insights and strategies for developing a healthy sense of self-worth. We'll share key takeaways from the book, along with practical tips and exercises for boosting your self-esteem and confidence. Whether you struggle with negative self-talk, lack of confidence, or simply want to improve your overall well-being, this video is for you. So let's dive in and discover the power of self-esteem.
Lesson 1. What is self-esteem? Most of us are children of dysfunctional families. I do not mean that most of us had alcoholic parents or were sexually or otherwise abused or that we grew up in an atmosphere of physical violence. I mean that most of us grew up in homes characterized by conflicting signals, denials of reality, parental lying, and lack of adequate respect for our mind and person. I am speaking of the average home. I recall discussing this issue one day with the distinguished family therapist Virginia Satter, who offered an exquisite and appalling example of the kind of craziness with which so many of us grew up. Imagine, she said, a scene among a child, a mother, and a father. Seeing a look of unhappiness on the mother's face, the child asks, "What's the matter, Mommy? You look sad." Mother answers, her voice tight and constricted, "Nothing's the matter. I am fine." Then father says angrily, "Don't upset your mother." The child looks back and forth between mother and father, utterly bewildered, unable to understand the rebuke. She begins to weep. The mother cries to father, "Now look what you've done." I like this story because of its ordinariness. Let us consider it more closely. The child correctly perceives that something is troubling mother and responds appropriately. Mother acts by invalidating the child's correct perception of reality. She lies. Perhaps mother does so out of the misguided desire to protect her child, or perhaps because she herself does not know how to handle her unhappiness. If she had said, "Yes, Mommy is feeling a little sad right now, thank you for noticing," she would have validated the child's perception. By acknowledging her own unhappiness simply and openly, she would have reinforced the child's compassion and taught something important concerning a healthy attitude toward pain. She would have decatastrophized the pain. Father, perhaps to protect mother or perhaps out of guilt because mother's sadness concerns him, rebukes the child, thus adding to the incomprehensibility of the situation. If the mother is not sad, why would a simple inquiry be upsetting? If she is sad, why is it wrong to ask about it, and why is Mommy lying? Now, to confound the child still five more, mother screams at father, rebuking him for reproaching their child. Contradictions compounded, incongruities on top of incongruities. How is the child to make sense of the situation? The child may run outside, frantically looking for something to do or someone to play with, seeking to erase all memory of the incident as quickly as possible. Repressing feelings and perceptions. And if the child flees into unconsciousness to escape the terrifying sense of being trapped in a nightmare, do we blame her well-meaning parents for behaving in ways that encourage her to feel that sight is dangerous and that there is safety in blindness? A story without villains, an unexceptional story without villains. No one is likely to imagine that the parents are motivated by destructive intentions. But in choosing to deny simple reality, they give the child the impression that she exists in an incomprehensible world where perception is untrustworthy and thought is futile. Multiply that incident by 1,000 more or less like it, none of which the child is likely to remember in later years. But all of which will almost certainly have a cumulative impact on the child's development. Are not most of us survivors of such experiences? If the child does draw the conclusion that her mind is impotent, or that its potency is doubtful, how can a good self-esteem develop? And without it, how will she face life? For complex factors determine our self-esteem. I do not wish to imply that how our parents treat us determines the level of our self-esteem. The matter is more complex than that. We have a decisive role of our own to play. The notion that we are merely pawns shaped and determined by our environment cannot be supported scientifically or philosophically. We are causal agents in our own right, active contestants in the drama of our lives, originators and not merely reactors or responders. Clearly, however, the family environment can have a profound impact for good or for ill. Parents can nurture self-trust and self-respect or place appalling roadblocks in the way of learning such attitudes. They can convey that they believe in their child's competence and goodness, or they can convey the opposite. They can create an environment in which the child feels safe and secure, or they can create an environment of terror. They can support the emergence of healthy self-esteem, or they can do everything conceivable to subvert it. Obstacles to the growth of self-esteem. Parents throw up severe obstacles to the growth of a child's self-esteem when they convey that the child is not enough. Chastise the child for expressing unacceptable feelings. Ridicule or humiliate the child. Convey that the child's thoughts or feelings have no value or importance. Attempt to control the child by shame or guilt. Overprotect the child and consequently obstruct normal learning and increasing self-reliance. Raise a child with no rules at all, and thus no supporting structure, or else rules that are contradictory, bewildering, undiscussable, and oppressive, in either case inhibiting normal growth. Deny a child's perception of reality and implicitly encourage the child to doubt his or her mind. Treat evident facts as unreal, thus shaking the child's sense of rationality. For example, when an alcoholic father stumbles to the dinner table, misses the chair, and falls to the floor as the mother goes on eating or talking as if nothing had happened. Terrorize a child with physical violence or the threat of it, thus instilling acute fear as an enduring characteristic at the child's core. Treat a child as a sexual object. Teach that the child is bad, unworthy, or sinful by nature. Today, millions of men and women who have come out of such childhood experiences are searching for ways to heal their wounds. They recognize that they have entered adult life with a liability, a deficit of self-esteem. Whatever words they use to describe the problem, they know they suffer from some nameless sense of not being enough, or some haunting emotion of shame or guilt, or a generalized self-distrust, or a diffusive feeling of unworthiness. They sense their lack even if they do not know what precisely self-esteem is, let alone how to nurture and strengthen it within themselves. A definition of self-esteem: a powerful human need. We who are psychotherapists or teachers seek to fan a spark in those we work with, that innate sense of self-worth that presumably is our human birthright. But that spark is only the anteroom to self-esteem. If we are to do justice to those we work with, we need to help them develop that sense of self-worth into the full experience of self-esteem. Self-esteem is the experience that we are appropriate to life and to the requirements of life. More specifically, self-esteem is 1. Confidence in our ability to think and to cope with the challenges of life. 2. Confidence in our right to be happy, the feeling of being worthy, deserving, entitled to assert our needs and wants and to enjoy the fruits of our efforts. Self-esteem is a powerful human need. It is a basic human need that makes an essential contribution to the life process. It is indispensable to normal and healthy development. It has survival value. Lacking positive self-esteem, our psychological growth is stunted. Positive self-esteem operates as, in effect, the immune system of consciousness, providing resistance, strength, and a capacity for regeneration. When self-esteem is low, our resilience in the face of life's adversities is diminished. We crumble before vicissitudes that a healthier sense of self could vanquish. We tend to be more influenced by the desire to avoid pain than to experience joy. Negatives have more power over us than positives. Addiction and self-esteem. These observations help us to understand addictions. When we become addicted to alcohol or drugs or destructive relationships, the unconscious intention is invariably to ameliorate anxiety and pain. What we become addicted to are tranquilizers and anodynes. The enemies we are trying to escape are fear and pain. When the means we have chosen do not work and make our problems worse, we are driven to take more and more of the poison that is killing us. Addicts are not less fearful than other human beings, they are more fearful. Their pain is not milder, it is more severe. We cannot drink or drug our way into self-esteem any more than we can buy happiness with toxic relationships. We do not attain self-esteem by practices that evoke self-hatred. If we do not believe in ourselves, neither in our efficacy nor in our goodness, the universe is a frightening place. Valuing ourselves, this does not mean that we are necessarily incapable of achieving any real values. Some of us may have the talent and drive to achieve a great deal, in spite of a poor self-concept, like the highly productive workaholic who is driven to prove his worth to, say, a father who predicted he would amount to nothing. But it does mean that we will be less effective, less creative, than we have the power to be, and it means that we will be crippled in our ability to find joy in our achievements. Nothing we do will ever feel like enough. If we do have realistic confidence in our mind and value, if we feel secure within ourselves, we tend to experience the world as open to us and to respond appropriately to challenges and opportunities. Self-esteem empowers, energizes, motivates. It inspires us to achieve and allows us to take pleasure and pride in our achievements. It allows us to experience satisfaction in their enthusiasm. Some writers today seem to suggest that a healthy sense of self-value is all we need to assure happiness and success. The matter is more complex than that. We have more than one need, and there is no single solution to all the problems of our existence. A well-developed sense of self is a necessary condition of our well-being but not a sufficient condition. Its presence does not guarantee fulfillment, but its lack guarantees some measure of anxiety, frustration, despair. Self-esteem proclaims itself as a need by virtue of the fact that its relative absence impairs our ability to function. This is why we say it has survival value. This is why we say it has survival value. And never more so than today. We have reached a moment in history when self-esteem, which has always been a supremely important psychological need, has also become a supremely important economic need, an attribute imperative for adaptiveness to an increasingly complex, challenging, and competitive world. Psychological resources for the future: the shift from a manufacturing society to an information society, the shift from physical labor to mind work as the dominant employee activity, and the emergence of a global economy characterized by rapid change, accelerating scientific and technological breakthroughs, and an unprecedented level of competitiveness. Create demands for higher levels of education and training than were required of previous generations. Everyone acquainted with business culture knows this. But what is not equally understood is that these developments also create new demands on our psychological resources. Specifically, these developments ask for a greater capacity for innovation, self-management, personal responsibility, and self-direction. This is asked not just at the top, but at every level of a business enterprise, from senior management to first-line supervisors and even to entry-level personnel. A modern business can no longer be run by a few people who think and a great many people who do what they are told, the traditional military command and control model. Today, organizations need not only an unprecedentedly higher level of knowledge and skill among all those who participate, but also a higher level of personal autonomy, self-reliance, self-trust, and the capacity to exercise initiative, in a word, self-esteem. This means that people possessing a decent level of self-esteem are now needed economically in large numbers. Historically, this is a new phenomenon. The importance of self-esteem in the workplace is discussed at length in Chapter 4. Intelligent choices require self-esteem in a world where there are more choices and options than ever before, and frontiers of limitless possibilities face us in whatever direction we look. We require a higher level of personal autonomy. This means a greater need to exercise independent judgment, to cultivate our own resources, and to take responsibility for the choices, values, and actions that shape our lives, a greater need for self-trust and self-reliance, a greater need for a reality-based belief in ourselves. The greater the number of choices and decisions we need to make at a conscious level, the more urgent our need for self-esteem. To the extent that we are confident in the efficacy of our minds, confident of our ability to think, learn, understand, we tend to persevere when faced with difficult or complex challenges. Persevering, we tend to succeed more often than we fail, thus confirming and reinforcing our sense of efficacy. To the extent that we doubt the efficacy of our minds and lack confidence in our thinking, we tend not to persevere but to give up. Giving up, we fail more often than we succeed, thus confirming and reinforcing our negative self-assessment. High self-esteem seeks the stimulation of demanding goals, and reaching demanding goals nurtures good self-esteem. Low self-esteem seeks the safety of the familiar and undemanding, and confining oneself to the familiar and undemanding serves to weaken self-esteem. The higher our self-esteem, the better equipped we are to cope with adversity in our careers or in our personal lives, the quicker we are to pick ourselves up after a fall, the more energy we have to begin anew. The higher our self-esteem, the more ambitious we tend to be, not necessarily in a career or financial sense, but in terms of what we hope to experience in life, emotionally, creatively, spiritually. The lower our self-esteem, the less we aspire to, and the less we are likely to achieve. Either path tends to be self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating. The higher our self-esteem, the more disposed we are to form nourishing rather than toxic relationships. Like is drawn to like, health is attracted to health, and vitality and expansiveness in others are naturally more appealing to people of good self-esteem than our emptiness and dependency. Attraction to those whose self-esteem level matches our own. An important principle of human relationships is that we tend to feel most comfortable, most at home, with people whose self-esteem level resembles our own. High self-esteem individuals tend to be drawn to high self-esteem individuals. Medium self-esteem individuals are typically attracted to medium self-esteem individuals. Low self-esteem seeks low self-esteem in others. The most disastrous relationships are those between two persons both of whom think poorly of themselves. The union of two abysses does not produce a height. I am thinking of a woman I once treated who grew up feeling she was bad and undeserving of kindness, respect or happiness. Predictably, she married a man who knew he was unlovable and felt consumed by self-hatred. He protected himself by being cruel to others before they could be cruel to him. She did not complain about his abuse, since she knew that abuse was her destiny. He was not surprised by her increasing withdrawal and remoteness from him, since he knew no one could ever love him. They had spent 20 years of torture together, proving how right they were about themselves and about life. When I commented to the wife that she had not known much happiness, she looked at me astonished and said, "Are people ever really happy?" The higher our self-esteem, the more inclined we are to treat others with respect, benevolence, goodwill, and fairness, since we do not tend to perceive them as a threat, and since self-respect is the foundation of respect for others. The time bomb of poor self-esteem. While an inadequate self-esteem can severely limit an individual's aspirations and accomplishments, the consequences of the problem need not be so obvious. Sometimes the consequences show up in more indirect ways. The time bomb of a poor self-concept may tick silently for years while an individual, driven by a passion for success and exercising genuine ability, may rise higher and higher in his profession. Then, without real necessity, he starts cutting corners, morally and/or legally, in his eagerness to provide more lavish demonstrations of his mastery. Then he commits more flagrant offenses still, telling himself that he is beyond good and evil as if challenging the fates to bring him down. Only at the end, when his life and career explode in disgrace and ruin, can we see for how many years he has been moving relentlessly toward the final act of an unconscious life script he may have begun writing at the age of 3. Self-efficacy and self-respect. Self-esteem has two interrelated aspects: 1. A sense of personal efficacy, self-efficacy; 2. A sense of personal worth, self-respect. As a fully realized psychological experience, it is the integrated sum of these two aspects. The experience of self-respect makes possible a benevolent, non-neurotic sense of community with other individuals, the fellowship of independence and mutual regard, as contrasted with either alienated estrangement from the human race, on the one hand, or mindless submergence into the tribe, on the other. Within a given person, there will be inevitable fluctuations in self-esteem levels, much as there are fluctuations in all psychological states. We need to think in terms of a person's average level of self-esteem. How do we experience our self-esteem? While we sometimes speak of self-esteem as a conviction about oneself, it is more accurate to speak of a disposition to experience oneself a particular way. What way? To recapitulate, 1. As fundamentally competent to cope with the challenges of life, thus, trust in one's mind and its processes, self-efficacy. 2. As worthy of success and happiness, thus, the perception of oneself as someone to whom achievement, success, respect, friendship and love are appropriate, self-respect. A formal definition O self-esteem. To sum up in a formal definition, self-esteem is the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the challenges of life and as deserving of happiness. Note that this definition does not specify the childhood environmental influences that support healthy self-esteem, example, physical safety, nurturing, etc., nor the later internal generators, example, the practice of living consciously, self-responsibly, etc., nor emotional or behavioral consequences, example, compassion, willingness to be accountable, etc. It merely identifies what the self-evaluation concerns and consists of. Am I suggesting that the definition of self-esteem I offer is written in stone and can never be improved on? Not at all. Definitions are contextual. They relate to a given level of knowledge. As knowledge grows, definitions tend to become more precise. I may find a better, clearer, more exact way to capture the essence of the concept during my lifetime. Or someone else may. But within the context of the knowledge we now possess, I can think of no alternative formulation that identifies with more precision the unique aspect of human experience we call self-esteem. The concept of competence as used in my definition is metaphysical, not Western. That is, it pertains to the very nature of things, to our fundamental relationship to reality. It is not the product of a particular cultural value bias. There is no society on earth, no society even conceivable, whose members do not face the challenges of fulfilling their needs, who do not face the challenges of appropriate adaptation to nature and to the world of human beings. The idea of efficacy in this fundamental sense, which includes competence in human relationships, is not a Western artifact, as I have heard suggested. We delude ourselves if we imagine there is any culture or society in which we will not have to face the challenge of making ourselves appropriate to life.